you remember the earlier Assassin's Creed games from 2007 to 2015, where you'd be suddenly put into some sort of crazy, unforgettable moment? You know, buildings collapsing over you, a carriage dragging you along, fires breaking out, and so on. And the game puts you right there, still in control, trying to survive it all. That's what we call a set piece. And if you played those older Assassin's Creed games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, make no mistake at all, these definitely weren't cutscenes or background events, as the set pieces were fully playable, high intensity moments that were just fun to play. And they used to be a massive part of what made Assassin's Creed so memorable. But somewhere along the way they vanished. Or rather, they just died down. So in this video, I want to dive deep into the art of the set piece and how the older games nailed them. Oh, and I do plan to make a video going over my, let's just say, top 10 or top 15 set pieces in Assassin's Creed. So I'll try not to go too in depth in my favorite set pieces in this video. I do also want to touch on whether Assassin's Creed can bring them back. And you know why it absolutely should. Because as good as the newer games are, in my opinion, I do think set pieces could elevate them a lot more. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, do consider hitting that subscribe button and let's just get into it. If you go back and play the older Assassin's Creed games, you know I'm talking pre-AC Origins, so from 2007 to 2015, you will definitely notice one major thing that this franchise used to do very well at, and that is these big, exciting, in-your-face moments that completely pulled you in. I'm talking about set pieces. Now these set pieces were parts of the game where things just exploded into, you know, some sort of dramatic event, and the game let you control the character through it all. Now, the important thing to note is that Assassin's Creed set pieces were not cutscenes or some type of background event. These were actual playable moments that felt like you were dropped into the middle of some sort of crazy action-packed disaster happening, but the game still gave you full control. Let's start with a few examples that stand out right away to me. The first one, and probably in my opinion the most memorable one in the franchise, is the Lisbon earthquake set piece from Assassin's Creed Rogue. If you aren't aware, there was a mission where you're in Lisbon during the 1755 earthquake. It starts out pretty calm, and then out of nowhere, once you mess with an artifact underground, the ground starts shaking, buildings collapse and the streets crack open, and you're trying to escape to the city that's literally falling apart. It's a real historical event, and the game turns it into this pretty dramatic escape sequence. And then there's Unity, where one of the missions has you escaping a literal burning building. You actually set fire to the building from the inside and, funnily enough, escape upward to the roof. And this was a great set piece moment that felt, you know, what's the word, thrilling. That's the perfect word right there. The idea of escaping something within a time limit is thrilling. Another great example that's off the top of my head is Assassin's Creed 3 and the infiltration of Fort Walcott. To be honest, any of the Captain Kidd missions involve set pieces, but focusing on Fort Walcott, this one is more of a stealth heavy set piece, but it still delivers that same kind of tension. You approach by a small boat, sneak into the fort under heavy guard to find a map, and then you gotta escape the fort as it's bombarded with cannon fire, and it's about to collapse. It's fantastic because everything works together so well to make you feel like you're deep behind enemy lines with no easy way out. There's so many more set pieces I can talk about. You know, one last one I'll briefly mention is the Galata Tower set piece in Revelations. So it starts pretty normal. You enter the tower and descend some stairs, but suddenly the floor collapses and you're put into a fast-paced platforming sequence. You slide through debris, you climb collapsing structures, and zipline through caverns. It's an amazing set piece moment, and you know, there's no combat at all. It's just all about timing, movement, and reacting quickly. By the end, you're zipping across rooftops and making a final jump to uncover the Masyaf key. All of these missions are different in structure. Some are chase sequences, some are stealthy, some are more explosive, but they all have one thing in common. They are set pieces, and the developers created these ideas to absolute perfection. So what exactly is a set piece in this context? Basically, it's a moment that's been designed to feel big and cinematic, like something out of a movie, but the difference is you're still playing it. It's not exactly a generic cutscene, more like a playable one. A set piece would allow you to be running, climbing, reacting, and figuring things out on the fly, whilst the environment around you either collapses or gets set on fire, that sort of thing. That's a big part of why these set pieces were so effective. The tension these set pieces gave off was real, because at the end of the day you still had to think and act to make it through. I should also note that another reason they worked so well is because they were often tied to important story moments or even real historical events. You know, going back to the Lisbon earthquake example, that really happened. Well, not literally as in Shay in real life escaping on rooftops, but the actual earthquake itself in real history was real, and the game lets you live through that disaster as part of the main story mission. For Walcott, while more fictionalized, feels grounded in the atmosphere of the time. It feels like you're on a stealth mission in dangerous territory. Even the Galata Tower sequence I mentioned too in Revelations. It feels like a massive moment both in terms of the story and the gameplay. And then there's the way these set pieces help with pacing. Assassin's Creed games have always had relatively sizable maps with some sort of exploration and, more slower paced stealth sections. Older games had these set pieces that broke that up. They were like little spikes of adrenaline in between the quieter parts of the game. Now I love these because, randomly you could be doing the most normal slow paced mission and then suddenly the next part of the mission puts you into a collapsing tower or a burning city. That's the unpredictable nature the older games used to have. Even if you're like me and forget the names of these missions or the exact objectives, chances are you do remember the set pieces within those missions. And even though many of these sequences were technically scripted, they did not feel fake whatsoever. Now what I mean by that is they didn't feel like the game was dragging you from one spot to the next. You still had to, pick up your controller and press the button still. How you climbed, where you jumped, which enemy you should fight, I think that level of interactivity made a massive difference. I think if these set pieces were like the ones in God of War or The Last of Us, where the game suddenly throws a button prompt at you during what feels like a movie scene, they would not have the same impact at all. Thankfully, Ubisoft did not take that approach with Assassin's Creed. So yeah, this was something Assassin's Creed used to do really well. Unfortunately, as we'll see soon in the video, set pieces disappeared after, I'd say, Syndicate or maybe Unity, and it's when the game shifted to the RPG open world era. These newer games took a different direction, and while they gained some new strengths, they also left these kinds of sequences behind. But during that earlier stretch, Assassin's Creed truly mastered the art of the set piece, and those moments are still some of the best the series has ever had. If you played the more recent Assassin's Creed games, so Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage and Shadows, you probably noticed that something feels different. Now I'm not referring to just the setting or the RPG format. What I really mean is the absence of those big unforgettable set pieces that used to interrupt the gameplay in the best way possible and leave you thinking, that was incredible. After Syndicate, the franchise went through a pretty big shift, as I'm sure we all know. Ubisoft rebooted the formula with Origins in 2017. Instead of a mostly linear mission based structure, the games became huge open world RPGs, and with that change a lot of things were added, like leveling systems, an RPG loot system, skill trees, that sort of stuff. But some things got quietly lost along the way. One of the biggest losses to me was the set pieces. Let's actually break down why that is. So the older games that used to contain set pieces were games that featured scripted story moments, and now with the focus moved away from that and into open-ended exploration and even non-linear pathways to a story, which is insane, this all came at the cost of a structure. Now by the way, I love the newer games, so don't think I'm hating them entirely. They're beautiful and massive, but unfortunately that shift in scale, as I already said, came at the cost of structure. Older Assassin's Creed games were, let's just say, tighter and clearly linear. They had missions that were handcrafted, so these would be quite shorter in length, but the actual impact of the mission would be fantastic, and it would elevate the experience a lot more. When something big happened back then, it felt like the game was building toward that moment. There was a clear lead-in with a dramatic peak, and then a release. These were your set pieces, like as I mentioned the Lisbon earthquake in Rogue, or the burning building escape in Unity. With these recent games, the big moments tend to happen in a much looser way. You might still have action, sure, we've got large-scale battles, there's boss fights and there's raids, I guess, but they don't feel special. They feel like extensions of the open world instead of planned cinematic highlights. So here's the thing, I'm not trying to just talk about how great the old Assassin's Creed set pieces were, because I've said many times they were. I want to talk about why they need to come back, and can they? Because the truth is, this franchise is still well and truly alive. It's still evolving over time, for better and for worse. And even though the newer games have moved in a completely different direction, I don't think we need to fully go back to the old formula just to bring back set pieces. I think they can absolutely exist in modern Assassin's Creed. Even in an open world RPG format, they can still be done, and I genuinely think the series would be better for it. I'm not crazy if I say the open world shift did not have to mean losing those big dramatic handcrafted moments. Open world games can still have carefully constructed missions. In fact, a lot of the best open world games out there, like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Ghost of Tsushima, prove that you can have a big open world and still deliver incredible cinematic sequences with actual emotional or story weight. So why not modern Assassin's Creed? Let's imagine for a second that, you're playing one of the new AC games like Valhalla and Shadows, and instead of every mission being go here or kill this, suddenly the game puts you into some sort of a collapsing building in the middle of a boss fight. I think the best comparison I can give is the very first fight in AC Origins against Rujek's bodyguard. That's a rare example of a scripted set piece moment where the ground collapses and the environment changes as we're fighting. That's technically a set piece. These are the kinds of moments that could exist in a large large open world. You just need to build them into the story missions with purpose. Ubisoft already knows how to build these types of missions, they've done it before. So the question isn't can they, it's more like will they? And honestly I hope they do, because one of the biggest things missing from the newer games for me is that emotional spike, that sense of tension and danger, and oh man what's happening, that only a set piece can really deliver. You know, I do hope Assassin's Creed Hexe can bring back set pieces. If you don't know, Hexe is the next mainline Assassin's Creed game that's supposedly going to be more linear and story driven again, much more in line with the old format, so I would assume similar to a Unity or a Syndicate kind of structure. Ubisoft has not shown much at all, but we can clearly see the actual vibe is very dark and totally different from anything the franchise has done before. The rumors say it's going to be more horror focused and not an RPG like the last few games, which is fine, and that's exciting because it's the perfect setup to bring back set pieces in a big way. If you're doing a game where the rumors say it's kind of horror but also a linear style game, you need high impact moments. A set piece can be something as simple as, you know, let's say during a witch hunt, you escape whilst being hunted and the forest around you starts burning. That's a set piece, because at the end of the day there's things happening in the background that are scripted and we are controlling the protagonist to escape. Or maybe you're exploring a plague-ridden city and have to escape as the buildings collapse around you, all while something not entirely human is chasing you. That's a set piece. And in a game like Assassin's Creed Hexe, those kinds of moments would be essential for atmosphere and pacing. And beyond just Hexe, I hope Ubisoft realizes that set pieces are not tied to a specific game design. I've always seen set pieces as a tool that can be used, where it's able to let us feel all sorts of tension and excitement that used to be part of Assassin's Creed's DNA, and there's no reason it can't be again. I get that the newer RPG games have their own strengths. They're huge, there's freedom and there's tons to do, but even the best open world needs moments that cut through the noise. Set pieces used to be that. That's exactly what I want back.